How often do you think about feeding your forever guests? What am I talking about? Your forever guests are your gut microbiome buddies, all those little critters that live in our gut microbiome. And that's what we're talking about today on Wellness by Design. I'm your host, Jane Hogan, the wellness engineer. My guest today is Simh, and she is an expert in the microbiome, all things microbiome. And we have a great conversation about the microbiome, especially the connection between the gut and the brain. And actually, even if you have chronic pain, if your gut microbiome is off, it could be adding to your pain. All right, stay tuned. I think you're really going to enjoy this. And let's dive in, see inside. Simh, welcome to Wellness by Design today. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's my pleasure.
I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. I know you got a book coming out. We're going to talk about that. And the work that you do, you're a health coach, you help people with the gut microbiome. Now, I'm wondering if you came to this work because of a personal journey. Did you have anything like that? Like a lot of us do?
Yeah, just like a lot of us, perhaps you as well. I came to it because of my own struggles. Many moons ago, I had massive gut issues. And like most of us do, I went from doctor to doctor in search of answers. And some said, oh, and my gut issues were like massive, right? I had bloating one day. I was fine the next day. I was uncomfortable all the time. I was low in energy. I mean, it just affected every aspect of who I was. And so, of course, I was searching for answers. And some of the doctors said, well, you need to eat more protein. Others said, you need to cut down on veggies. You need to eat more veggies. They're all over the place. And I was like, what the heck? What do I do now? And then I still remember, Jane, I walked into a new office hoping for answers because I thought, okay, this is a new doctor. And I remember he looked at me and he started laughing.
What?
Yeah. And he said, what you're describing is something we residents go through all the time. In other words, suck it up. I just remember leaving that office feeling
Wow.
so utterly hopeless. And I sat in that parking lot, San Diego, late October, 90 degrees outside, didn't care. I had the windows rolled up and I just sat there and I bawled. I said, no one's getting me. I don't know what to do. They don't understand this. And at that moment, I just got this. I heard this voice that was from my grandfather. And he was a physicist and a Renaissance man, and he um, always said, I think he was probably the first person who said to me, food is medicine. And I heard that for the first time in a long time that day in that car. And I said, the wisdom to heal myself is within me. What am I doing? Just going crazy, going from doctor to doctor. So I put my science background to work. And I'm talking about a time when we didn't have internet or chat GPT or anything like that. So I sat at the UCSD library researching the heck out of my symptoms. I thought, what's going on? And that's where I discovered the microbiome. That's where I fell in love with our forever guests, those trillions of bacteria within us who do so much for us, training our immune system, managing our blood sugar, weight, chronic symptoms, all of that is from that feeding the microbiome. And I realized that when you feed them the foods that they really like and thrive on, um, you thrive.
Right.
When you give them the wrong kinds of foods, they can go rogue on you. And then that leads to systemic inflammation and all kinds of other chronic problems, kind of like how I was going through at that time. I realized that I wasn't really feeding my microbes well. I had bought into this whole American way of eating. I left behind my ancestral wisdom, that had nourished many generations, before. And so just kind of going for convenience, just Diet Coke, pizza, French fries at late night, student life, all of that, and it did not serve me.
Mm.
So I started healing my body and going back to that wisdom and learning about fiber, prebiotic foods, fermented foods that was such an integral part of how I was raised. And I had given up and forgotten in this whole thing about the American dream and being um, work, 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 convenience, all of that, you know.
Mhm.
And and then when I started adding all these foods back, I started feeling better. And that's when I realized that this needs to be shared. Everyone needs to know about this incredible thing that's within us that's doing so much for us. And I think it was Maya Angelou who said, when you're healed, go find someone else to heal or something like that. And that
Oh, really?
became like
A good one.
my mantra, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
I said, okay, this is what I need. This is my mission. I need to tell people about the microbiome. And I'm talking when this was when the Human Microbiome Project came out, and we were still like in the early infancy stages of learning about the microbiome. But since then, we have so much information about them, and
Yeah,
we're
it's
really
really,
understanding. It's mind-boggling, you know, the amount of research that's kind of connected our in every aspect: the immune system, gut; brain, gut; cardiovascular health, gut. You name it, there's a connection. But
yeah.
the one underlying thing that hasn't changed is how you feed them. That hasn't changed. You know how diets keep changing on us? One day protein is good, one day protein is bad, one day veggies are good. Oh, oxalate, all of that. The one thing researchers are seeing throughout, I mean, all these years, I haven't seen this one change, is fiber. Fiber is the food that they is feeding them. So when they
Right.
eat fiber foods, they are producing some really incredible healthy compounds called short chain fatty acids, butyrate in particular, that really makes us flourish and thrive.
Mm. Gosh, what a story. What
Mm.
year was this, Anu, when you
I,
discovered the
I,
microbiome?
are you wanting me to date myself?
Well, I'm just wondering because I mean,
No,
the
no, no, of course.
microbiome is not, it
Yeah.
has been around, I mean, what, maybe 10, 15 years?
Yeah, this was actually 2014. It was in,
2014.
yeah. By then, the Human Microbiome Project was all up and running. The Sonnenbergs, I think, had written their book, The Good Gut, you know. So I just remember that there are not that many studies at that time, but it got me really excited that this is something that I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
But over the years, I mean, and of course, the past 3 years I've been spending on writing my book, and amazing how much research is out there. Just brilliant, you know. So.
And everyone's heard of the microbiome now, I
Yeah.
think. Like my
Well, Jane, maybe not.
really, we think that because we're in this circle.
Exactly. 2 out of 3 Americans
Hmm.
have not heard the word microbiome, and it's my
Really?
mission. Yeah. That
Wow.
I'm on a mission. I want to change that. Everybody should know what the microbiome is and what these gut microbes are doing for you. So I think it's important.
So on my pain, everything came on in 2016, and I
Yeah.
discovered the microbiome then too, had not
Mm.
heard of it before. So I was like you, started telling everyone about it. And it was just starting, it felt to me like maybe it was just because it was my story.
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
hearing about it. But I remember a friend of mine who had an autoimmune condition, and I mentioned about the microbiome and how it was affecting, because we know that's directly related
Yeah.
about an autoimmune condition. And she said she went to her doctor and mentioned it, and he said, "What's that?" So,
Well, I mean, doctors are about 17 years behind as far as
yeah,
research, and it's not their fault. I mean,
no, it's not their
they're
fault.
just, yeah, yeah, it's just the way it is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's up to us to kind of figure out a little bit more about what's happening out there. So,
And do you feel like it's gone like a little bit, maybe, I don't know, askew somewhere because, then everyone knows about probiotics now. So they're like taking probiotics, and so they're
yeah.
thinking they can
No, but
supplement.
there's certainly a lot of misunderstanding around it, you
Right.
know, because probiotics is not this cure all for everything. And in fact, it can harm you if you have certain gut conditions. Like, for example, what I was going through back then, if I had added like a probiotic right away into the mix. It would have caused more havoc. So I think the important thing for
Yes.
for listeners to understand is what really constitutes a healthy microbiome. So
Hmm.
if you're okay with that, maybe we start there so we learn what is a healthy microbiome.
Yeah, let's do that. I love
Yeah.
the term that you use. I think you said forever, our forever guests.
Yeah. So
And
in
they,
my culture, we say guests are akin to God.
okay.
And so even today, I've actually passed on this job to my husband. I every night we decide what kind of fiber are we going to eat the next day.
Hmm.
So I have him look at all my neatly arranged fiber components, all the beans and lentils and all of that. Say, honey, pick one. So we're going to eat that tomorrow. But anyway, going back to what is a healthy microbiome, a healthy microbiome is a resilient microbiome. You want a microbiome that can bounce back after an illness, a dietary change. Who among us hasn't had an UTI, and antibiotics that can affect the microbiome? But if you have a resilient microbiome, it can bounce back and stay strong and recover from it. So, a resilient microbiome is one that has species richness, that has a different kinds of species, many different kinds of species that do different functions for us. But it's also important to have a microbiome that is species even, meaning there's not one species that's going
Right.
to dominate over the rest. Let's say you and I both have a microbiome with 100 species, and you have 50 of my species A and 50 of species B, and I have a microbiome with the same 100 species, but maybe 90% is A and 10% is B. You're going to have a more resilient microbiome because you have a little bit more diversity.
Hmm.
And that is something that I see in my clients. An average healthy American has about 200 species.
Okay.
And if you compare us to like the Hadza tribe that uses like the traditional hunter-gatherer foods and things like that, they have like 1,500 species. So
Wow.
we are really kind of down there. We are really
Not
losing
resilient.
them. No, and we're losing it every day, so to speak. And that's where food and stress and sleep, all of that matter, And my clients who are, I think the highest I've seen is 140. And
Really?
the lowest I have seen is like 22. So can you imagine someone with 22 species and the kind of problems? And the interesting thing is with this person, she didn't have any gut issues, but she had a lot of brain issues.
Right.
The gut brain was really affected, meaning anxiety and all of that
Mm.
stuff. Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question? How do you
Mhm.
know the quantity and variety of species for your clients? Do you do a microbiome test? And
Yeah.
what is
I
that?
do a whole genome sequencing test that kind of that I think a lot of tests today are going after the bad guys.
Mm.
Oh, you have these pathogenic bacteria. Let's get rid of it. That's not the way to handle a microbiome. You have to just bring that evenness back, which means I am more interested in getting more of the good guys than reducing the bad guys. Because as you get more of these good bacteria in, the pathogenic bacteria are going to starve out and die. So that's a better way to address it rather than just going and targeting one pathogenic bacteria.
Mhm.
And that's where feeding your microbiome becomes extremely crucial because if you start feeding them right, they're going to thrive. And hopefully, we are going to manage to save some of these species that are fast dying on us.
Mhm. So you mentioned, Anu, about the gut brain connection. So let's talk more about that because
Yeah,
I think that's going to be helpful for our audience to understand
sure.
that
Yeah,
connection and how, it's not just things going on in the gut, that it
yeah,
does affect what's going on in our brain
the
as well.
brain. So, Jane, I think you see a lot of people with that, and I do too. And sometimes it's really hard. Like, let's say, like I have a client, let's call her Sarah. She came in really thinking she wanted to figure out her weight issues. She says, I've done everything. I have tried all kinds of diets. I've calorie counted, all of that. I'm not seeing a single thing on the scale.
Mm.
But beyond that, what I was seeing was her anxiety and her, twitching and, just having to sit there and I'm just watching her, all I could think was something is affecting her gut-brain axis.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started digging deeper into it, and she was like quite proud that she had cut out all of these things, but instead of eating this high caloric food, she was drinking a lot of Diet Coke. She was having like coffee with, artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I started explaining to her about the microbiome and how they're not adept at taking care of these kind of sweeteners and things like that. In fact, it can affect your insulin resistance. It can affect your brain. Um, and when we started decreasing that, she saw a difference. She started calming down a little bit more, and she said, "Wow! I mean, I didn't realize that there's a connection." And that's because the gut and brain are talking all the time. 90% of the messages are from the gut to the brain, and it's happening through the vagus nerve. And almost like 80% of serotonin, the happy hormones made in our gut. And quite possibly that none of, that serotonin in your gut is really has a crucial role to play. It's keeping you, it's helping you with your gut motility, energy, so many different things. A lot of people who come to me are constipated. Women especially are severely constipated, and that could be a serotonin issue in the
Mm-hmm.
gut. So when we start looking at that and saying there are some serotonin species that are very adept at producing the serotonin, then you realize that this is where species richness matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because we may, like the Hatsu tribe might have about 25 different species looking at serotonin, we probably have two or three. So that makes a huge difference. And so
Right.
instead of treating a symptom like constipation, which can be a symptom or could be one of the causes of the root causes of a disease, we look at the gut for answers. And when we look at the gut, we also look at the brain because they are so connected.
Mm-hmm. You made me think about there's a study that was done that said basically they looked at, oh gosh, I forget how many now, but it was, hundreds of people with chronic pain. And they found that every single one of them had impaired vagal tone, which means, the messages aren't getting
Yeah.
from the gut to the brain like they should. So then, how would that then affect what's going on in the gut?
That's a great question. And that's the reason I think when you think about the vagus nerve and when you think about how important this is, and how it meanders around the gut and really collecting all the messages and sending it back to the brain, it becomes very important for us to tell our patients and clients the importance of training it, helping it. And so that's where everything from sleep hygiene to doing this whole throat chakra balance, and really helping it. It's not some, old, a thing like, oh, it's part of the yogic world or something like that. There's a lot of truth into what kind of breath to practice, what really helps the vagus nerve, the gargling, all of that really does matter. But and I think really understanding that importance of the gut-brain axis is so crucial.
So if the gut brain axis is not, if we're not getting that communication, then we're not getting the serotonin made.
Yeah,
It should.
yeah. Serotonin and GABA, there's
Mm-hmm.
so many things that are anxiety producing. And sometimes when you don't even need to look at a test, let's say your listeners are not like, I don't want to spend on another test. You just look at your body and say, well, if I make these changes and try to do it as an experimental goal for like 3 weeks and saying, if I change these foods and these habits,
Mm-hmm.
do I see a difference? I mean, nothing better than this human body to tell us, what we could be doing right or wrong, right?
It's a feedback mechanism, right?
Mechanism.
We get the
Yeah.
feedback. It's and
Yeah.
it's then we're really tailoring to ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
paying attention. And so many of us have learned, like over the years, learned that we need to take something or someone else has got to fix us instead of
Yeah.
really looking toward ourselves for the power that we have, right? And
Yeah.
doing this little experiment of one. So you
Yeah.
mentioned Anu, like getting not getting rid of some foods.
Hmm.
So one thing you talked about was artificial sweeteners. Do you
Hmm.
want to go into any other foods that might
Yeah,
be interfering with the healthy gut microbiome?
yeah. So knowing what we know about the microbiome, being resilient, we want species richness and species evenness. We look at foods from a different lens. We're always being told that processed foods are bad, or artificial sweeteners and things like that, or emulsifiers in these foods. And uh, we go back to thinking, why is that? Rather than just saying these hedonic foods are bad for us,
Yeah.
maybe look at it from the lens of the microbiome. If we're feeding it right, we need to give them food that they recognize as food. Sometimes it's like, us going into Home Depot and thinking, oh, I'm going to find something to eat here. That's how our gut microbiome is feeling when you give them all this nasty stuff. And I call them nasty because it is nasty for them. They're eating it. They don't know. The microbiome has bacteria that are very picky. They're picky eaters. They thrive on foods that are rich in fiber, things that we cannot digest.
Yeah.
And they can do a wonderful job feeding on these, in fiber-rich foods and producing healthy compounds for us. But on the other hand, if you feed them processed foods, and artificial sweeteners, emulsified food, preservatives, and things like that, they don't know what to do with it. But the pathogenic bacteria do. They can thrive on it. So the good bacteria don't touch it. The bad bacteria start thriving on it, and then when they have food, what happens? They grow.
Right.
So there's an imbalance in the gut, and that can cause every aspect. Your immune system stops thriving. Everything is like your gut bacteria, your gut microbiome is like a training ground for your immune system. 70% of your immune system is in the gut, and they are very adept at training it and saying, hey, this is a friend, this is a foe. Don't do anything with this. But imagine if you don't have that.
Mhm.
Everything becomes this crazy enemy that you're going to fight and fight. Is there any wonder that we have so much autoimmune conditions in our country right now? Hashi's, asthma, allergies. And then, and if we go about it looking at, oh, I'm just going to completely stop eating this, stop eating that, exclusion of all kinds of foods, you're again starving your gut microbiome.
Right.
But instead you
Variety.
go to, where's the variety? How do we increase this diverse foods so they start thriving, so we thrive?
I think it's really interesting. Like people hear probiotic foods, or not, is that the right word? No, what's the word I'm trying to think of, that micro they eat it first. It's
Probiotic is,
probiotic food.
when you eat probiotic, yeah, they become, they help you with live microbes.
Right.
Is that
So
what?
it's kind of funny to think like
Yeah,
something like fiber, right? That we're not eating it for us, we're feeding the
yeah,
microbiome, and then so that they can do the job that they've got to do.
right.
So it's really funny to think about it that way, I think. Um, but also I love thinking about the microbiome kind of like a garden, right?
Hmm.
If we have like a vegetable garden and we're trying to grow stuff in there, we're not going, if we just throw garbage in there, good things don't grow, and we wouldn't be surprised yet in our own bodies. If we put garbage in there, we're like, why do
Yeah,
I feel like garbage? Well, because I'm putting garbage in there.
yeah,
Our microbiome, what we want to grow, isn't going to grow.
yeah.
So, okay, so we were talking about the gut brain connection. So, what other some other signs and things that people might see if that gut brain axis is not working like it should?
Well, in my practice, what I've seen, the number one thing that changes the gut brain axis and really kind of gets you more relaxed and is sleep.
Hmm.
Sleep is like so important. And I feel like finally it was just kind of pushed off to the side for so long because we were in this American frenzy of work, 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 let's accomplish this. And we'd completely forgotten sleep. But finally now we're recognizing that sleep is important. So
Hmm.
I want to draw attention to sleep and the microbiome.
Hmm.
We have a circadian rhythm, right? We are diurnal. We completely recognize when day ends and night begins. And just like that, our microbiome has a circadian rhythm as well. So we need to respect that. So we're eating late at night, the microbes have to be digesting at all times during the night, which is not good for them. And the diversity is affected by that. And trying to just really kind of say, no to these processed foods and things like that later at night. So what we research is showing us that is like when you eat late at night or when you eat processed foods or things like that, the next day you're more apt to eat. I think I heard 400 to 500 calories more the next day.
Wow.
And that's and really connected to the microbiome because you're not respecting their circadian rhythm, and what's happening is they are producing more pathogenic bacteria, and that's increasing our this imbalance or dysbiosis in the gut. So
Mm.
imagine that happening day in and day out. So one of the first things I help my clients with is sleep hygiene. I think it holds the key. And like you said, the vagal tone, that's very important. Even from a microbial standpoint, I think it's really important to kind of just calm your nervous system down, really kind of, if I were to kind of maybe just say the top three things I work
Yeah.
on is sleep and I mean, food is first. But again, food is first only if they're not a nervous mess. If they're very anxious, I would not start with food
Hmm.
because it becomes very difficult to add one more thing to this poor person who is really struggling with so much and has to remember what to eat, when to eat, how to eat. It's a lot. So you start with balancing your nervous system first and then say, hey, are you ready to start some new things to balance your microbiome? That's generally a better way to do it. And really breath work. It's
Mm.
it's key for me. I This is something I start teaching my clients from day one. And
Yeah, I love it
different
too.
kinds of breath. And it's an ancient science, 4,000 years old. It's not today. It's just that we are finally giving it the importance that it deserves.
Yeah. Oh, so important. It just makes all the difference.
Yeah,
It's the fastest way to calm the nervous
yeah,
system, really.
yeah,
I love that. So you've got a book coming out. You want to tell us a little bit about your book?
yeah. So again, this is part of my mission, right? I just want more and more people to learn about the microbiome. And my own clients said, "Oh, I wish I had a book where everything was in one book." So that became sort of like, oh, maybe if my clients are asking for it, other people would too. So that's how I started researching about the microbiome in depth, and said, how is it affecting this population? How is it affecting that population? So I came up with a book. I call it Flourish from Within because I noticed when I started feeding my microbiome, I started flourishing. True human flourishing really means in body, mind, and soul. And that's what happened to me when I started feeding my microbiome. And I wanted to share that, with people and kind of say
Oh,
this one thing will hold the key to your future flourishing. And so the book has it's almost like a little primer on the microbiome, like just different aspects of it. So you learn, it's easy to read. And the second part is about the Flourish diet. So I don't go into don't do this, don't do that, don't eat animal protein, none of that. It's just you do your animal protein, pick what you want, but always balance it with foods that your microbiome loves. And I
mhm.
feel like it's a better way to handle it because food is personal, food is social, food is so many things, and you need to respect different cultures and cuisines. And so the Flourish diet is respecting whatever your personal beliefs are about food and whichever culture you come from, be it Mexican, Indians, um, every culture has fiber. We just need to go back and discover it and make it a part of our lives.
Mm.
And finally, I have about 50 recipes to
Oh,
support. Yeah.
people always love recipes. So could you like pick like the top five foods that are best for your microbiome, or is it more diverse than that? Or what I just
Well, it,
what's a takeaway for people here today? Like if they're saying, well, okay, what should I have for my microbiome?
yeah, I think not to, I would say the biggest takeaway is keep it simple. if you start looking at food as this, oh gosh, I have to make this recipe that's going to take me 4 hours. It's
Mm,
not going to happen. So my personal mantra is convenience leads to consistency.
mm,
So everything that I offer my clients is based on that. Like I have a format, you add this green, these resistant starches into it, all into a smoothie. Because Jane, when people are just discovering their gut health, their oral tolerance is really low. So a smoothie is a great way to get them started. And eventually, I want to graduate them into real food and chewing and all of that. But you need to start them where they are, right? So, really increasing fiber, and fiber comes only from the plant kingdom. So, just have a rainbow of vegetables, do some beans. If you can tolerate it, you may need some support as far as enzymes initially because you don't have the right bugs going to bat for you and digesting it, but eventually you will. That I can promise. Most people do start feeling better once they give it a chance, rather than being on very low FODMAP diets for life. Low FODMAP diets have a place, meaning low FODMAP diets are uh, foods like beans and lentils that cause a lot of bloating and, gas and things like that. But once you start growing these bugs, then you notice that you can slowly graduate to moderate FODMAPs and to high FODMAPs.
I had to do that for
Yeah.
a while too, because I had SIBO. Was that what you had as well? SIBO,
I
small.
don't know what I had because it was before we had things like IBS and SIBO. We didn't
Oh,
know that. I can guess that maybe I did have either IBS or SIBO, but I don't know which one. Yeah.
mm, yeah, and it's very tricky. But all I can say, to a testament to what you're saying, there is no way I could have tolerated eating beans back then. No problem now. You
Yeah.
really can recover when you
Yeah.
start
And I
nourishing.
think that is I think that's my message. Have the hope and know that you can heal yourself. I mean, optimal health is our birthright.
Mhm.
And no doctor or no person should be telling you that you need to suck it up. I will not. That is not a message for anybody,
Awful. That's awful. Okay, so we're going to have a link in the description for this, a link to your to pre-order your book, right?
Mhm.
And I know there's some gifts that come along with that, so
Yeah.
we'll have that there. And what is one thing, if you're going to say one tiny baby step that someone could take today that's going to begin to initiate healing in their body, what would you say that step is, Anna?
Well, I think for me, I feel like Americans are very deficient in one nutrient, and that's fiber. So
Hmm.
we are having like a paltry 5 to 10 grams of fiber, maybe.
Hmm.
So I would say slowly up your fiber, in whatever way it's possible. If you're like on a low FODMAP diet, that's fine. There are many fruits and vegetables that are low FODMAP, which have the fiber to support you. Slowly up your fiber would be my number one message. If you can do that, you are feeding your microbiome, and that goes through better immune system, better nervous system regulation, better gut health, better microbial population. So it's all connected.
Right. Prebiotic. That's the word I was looking for. They're
Oh, yeah,
prebiotic foods, right?
yeah. Not
The-
all fibers are prebiotic,
Okay.
but we could pick prebiotic fibers, like resistant starch and certain kinds of beans. And that's what the book goes in depth about, what kind of fibers are prebiotic in nature, what should we start with, and things like
Mm,
that. Yeah.
okay, wonderful. So, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure the audience hears?
Oh, nothing. I just want to leave them with hope.
I love that.
Train your microbiome and it'll do wonders for you. Feed it. Feed it the food that it deserves.
I'm so excited for your book coming out and
Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
following up on your wonderful message. So, where can people find you? Where's the best place for them to see what work you're doing?
So my website is Nine Arms of Wellness. That is my business, ninearmsofwellness.com. It's my message. And then my Instagram is at Nine Arms of Wellness as well. So it's
Is
easy
that
to
is
find.
that the number nine or the
Not the number 9
number
in
nine?
in in Instagram. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
being a
much.
guest
Yeah.
on Wellness by Design today. And also for getting this great message out. More people need to hear about it. Can't believe it's 2 out of 3 don't even know about the microbiome. So hopefully your book is going to change that. So thanks so much for that, Anu.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Wonderful. All right. We'll see everyone soon on Wellness by Design. Bye for now.